You've always heard the same story about rich people. They won a lottery. They got in early on something. They inherited it, or somebody backed them. Luck basically something that happens to other people. But wealth isn't an accident. It's predictable. It shows up in what you do long before it ever shows up in a bank account, because the account is always the last thing to change. You become rich twice, first in how you think, then later in the number. And right now, at 11:40 on a Tuesday, you're still on the first one. Sign one, you start playing the game. You put the phone face down on the mattress, but the number is still glowing behind your eyelids. $208. You pick the phone back up anyway. Because staring at your balance for one more minute makes you feel like you're doing something, even though you're not. Your thumb finds an app, and there it is, an ad you didn't ask for. A luxury car sitting in an empty garage, like it's waiting for someone. $160,000 before you even touch the options list. You don't really want the car. You want whatever it feels like to not do the math before you buy anything. You think about a guy you used to work with, call him Dre. Dre got an insurance settlement once, 30 grand, more money than either of you had ever seen land at once. He put a down payment on a lifted truck within the week. New rims 2 weeks after that. By spring, the truck was repossessed, and Dre was back at work, flinching every time his phone buzzed. You didn't judge him then. You understand it better now. Dre didn't trust that he could make more, so he spent like the money was the only proof he'd ever mattered. That's not greed. That's fear wearing a nice truck. Here's what nobody tells you at 11 at night with $200 in checking. Some of your problems really are about money, the rent due Friday, the card that got declined at the grocery store with a line building behind you. That kind of problem doesn't care how evolved you are. Money fixes it. Full stop. But underneath the rent and the groceries is a second kind of problem. Whether you like your life, whether you feel free, whether you're proud of the person your reflection keeps catching you being. Money doesn't touch that one directly. It just buys you the room to go find out. You've been treating your whole life like something that happens to you. A balance you watch the way you'd watch the weather, something to react to, never something to move. But tonight, a different idea takes shape. Not that money will fix everything, just that it isn't random. It has rules. And rules can be learned. So for the first time in longer than you'd admit, you don't put the phone back down. You open the calculator instead, and you start doing the math you've been avoiding for months. It's not the math that changes anything tonight. It's that you're finally the one doing it. Sign 2. You move before you're ready. The next morning, you're back at your desk by 8:15, coffee going cold, and the calculator from last night is still open in your recent apps like a small, stubborn reminder. You don't close it. At lunch, a coworker sits down and starts talking about his app idea again, the one he's had the name picked out for over a year and still hasn't registered a single thing for. You used to nod and change the subject. Today you ask him why not. I guess I want to have it more figured out first, he says. You used to say the exact same thing about 100 versions of your own life. The certification you meant to get. The side gig you meant to start. All of it sitting in a notes folder literally titled Ideas, untouched for so long, some entries are time-stamped 2 winters ago. Here's the part that used to make you feel worse, and now makes you feel lighter. An idea sitting in your head is worth exactly nothing, not because it's bad, but because it never left the only place where nothing can be tested or built. His app is worth 0 right now, and it'll stay 0 as long as it stays a text file. Same for whatever's in your folder. That afternoon, you finally open the tab you'd closed 3 times last week, a $40 online course in something you could actually do nights and weekends with skills you already have. $40 feels like a stupid amount to hesitate over. And you hesitate anyway, because $40 spent on yourself has always felt riskier than $40 spent on anything else. You buy it before you can talk yourself out of it. Nobody claps. Your balance barely moves. But hitting purchase on your own education feels different than hitting it on a pair of shoes, because shoes depreciate the second you leave the store. And this is the opposite bet. This is money on the version of you that follows through. Betting on yourself isn't a slogan. It's the only investment where you also happen to be the asset. That night you tell one person about the course, not because you're proud yet, but because saying it out loud makes it more real. And that's when you start noticing exactly who leans in when you say it, and who changes the subject back to themselves. Sign 3. You audit your inner circle. 3 weeks into the course, you're at a long table at an Italian place downtown, celebrating a friend's engagement. And underneath the toast, you notice something. The guy to your left spends 20 minutes explaining why he's still driving a car with the check engine light taped over, not because he can't afford better, but because banks are just casinos for rich people, and the market's rigged anyway, so what's the point? He says it like a joke. You've heard some version of it at every dinner for 2 years. Across from him, someone else is talking about a small rental property she just closed on one she found by driving through different neighborhoods on weekends until she understood which blocks were about to turn. She isn't bragging. She's just talking about her Tuesday. You used to sit closer to the first guy's energy, not because you agreed, but because agreeing was easier than explaining why you'd started reading about index funds on your lunch break. Tonight, for the first time, you catch yourself leaning toward the other half of the conversation instead. Asking a real question. Actually listening. They say your income tends to land near the average of the few people you spend the most time with. You don't know if that's a real statistic or just something that sounds true. But sitting here, watching who talks about money like it's an enemy and who talks about it like a hobby they're getting good at, you can feel it working on you anyway, like weather. You're not about to cut anyone off, that's not how this works. But you notice something quieter. You stop bringing up your course to the first guy after he changed the subject to fantasy football mid-sentence. You mentioned it to the other person instead, and she asked 3 follow-up questions and sent you a podcast the next morning. You're not choosing new friends. You're just finally noticing which ones lean in. Walking to your car, you think about how easy it would be to let her success turn into another reason to feel behind. But you're not behind her. You're behind your own last year, the only comparison that was ever going to mean anything. Sign 4. You stop playing defense. Saturday morning, you're in the cereal aisle with a folder of coupons you started keeping back in winter. 10 cents off oat milk. 50 cents off frozen broccoli you don't even like. It feels responsible. Adult, the kind of thing a person taking their money seriously should do. You do the math anyway, under the fluorescent lights. Best case, this folder saves you maybe $30 or $40 a month. You've been doing it for 4 months. That's less than 1 dinner out, spread across a whole season of clipping and sorting. Then you think about your first real client from that course, a guy who runs a small landscaping operation and hired you at $40 an hour to clean up a bookkeeping file nobody had touched since spring. When he paid your first invoice, it landed in 1 afternoon, and it was more than the coupon folder had saved you all year. That's the moment it lands, standing there holding a coupon for broccoli. You can only cut so much. Rent doesn't go below a certain number. Gas doesn't either. There's a floor, and you've been standing on it, straining to shave off dimes. But there's no ceiling on the other side. 40 an hour could become 50. One client could become a second, a third. Nothing about your income has a floor pressing down the way your spending does. You put the folder back in your bag, you don't throw it away. Old habits get to stay a while. But that night you finally look up a number you've been avoiding. The median household net worth in this country. It comes back around $190,000. You're not there. Not close. But for the first time, the number doesn't make you feel small. It makes you feel like a target with a shape instead of a fog you were guessing at. Because that number isn't income or the car in your driveway. It's the difference between what you own and what you owe. Your client's invoice is an asset. The oat milk coupon was never going to be one, no matter how disciplined you got. You text him back that night and say yes to a second job, more hours than you planned. And you say yes anyway, because you finally understand you'd been optimizing the wrong side of the equation the entire time. Sign 5. You feed assets, not ego. A coworker catches you in the break room, practically vibrating, holding her arm out so you can't miss it. A new luxury bag, buttery leather, gold hardware, catching the light. $15,000, she says, like the words themselves are the accomplishment. You say the right things, it's beautiful, because it is. But you do the math without meaning to, the way you do on everything now. She's been at the company 2 years longer than you. Same salary bracket. And you happen to know she's still paying down 2 different cards. The bag is real. So is the interest compounding underneath it, quietly, every single month, on money that already left the building. You don't say any of that. You go back to your desk and open the retirement page, through work the one you'd click past 100 times. Turns out there's a limit to how much you can put in this year, and a second kind of account you can add on top. Explained like it's the most obvious thing in the world, though nobody ever explained it to you before. Numbers that used to feel like they belonged to a different kind of person. Tonight they just feel like a ceiling you're nowhere near, which somehow makes them less intimidating, not more. You think of something an old mentor used to say, nobody starts on the heaviest weight. You didn't get it then. You get it now, with a paycheck that finally has room in it. So you don't dump in everything you have. You open a brokerage account and you put in $50. Just 50. A boring index fund, the kind that quietly tracks the whole market instead of trying to be clever. $50 won't buy that bag. It won't buy a fraction of it. But the bag is worth less the day after she buys it, and less every day after that, the way it works for cars and phones and everything built to be looked at instead of held. Your 50, boring as it is the opposite. It's built to grow while you're not watching. Picture a seesaw. On one end, the things that drain money the second you own them. On the other, the things that quietly pull money back toward you while you sleep. You've spent your whole adult life loading the wrong side without noticing there were 2 sides at all. You set up an automatic transfer before you can talk yourself out of it. $50 every other Friday, the same day the invoices land. No ring to catch the light, no bag to hold up, just a number finally moving in the right direction on a schedule instead of by accident. Sign 6, you let persistence beat luck. It's a Thursday in November, almost a year to the week since that $200 night. Your client texts you from his truck. His cousin runs a bigger operation 2 counties over, books nobody's touched in years, and he gave him your number without asking. Told him you're the real deal. You sit with that a second. The real deal. 11 months ago, you were a person with a folder of expired coupons and a course you almost didn't buy for $40. Now a stranger is about to become your 4th client. People will look at this and call it luck. You happen to be in the right inbox at the right time. And maybe there's a piece of that. But you know something they don't, because you were there for all 11 months, not just this one text. You know about the modules you finished at midnight, because that was the only hour you had. The dinner where you almost said nothing about the course at all. The $50 that left your account every other Friday, whether you felt motivated or not. They say an overnight success is usually about 7 years in disguise. You're not 7 years in, you're closer to 1. But you finally understand the math of it. The version of you who never opened that $40 tab never gets this text. The version who quit the transfer in month 3 the week the car needed brakes and $50 felt like it mattered more somewhere else, never builds the thing showing up now. You almost were that version. You remember the exact Tuesday you almost stopped. You say yes. 4 clients now. Real income stacking on top of the job you still show up to every morning. And the transfer that started at $50 a paycheck sits a little higher these days, still automatic, still boring, still the least exciting number in your financial life, and somehow the one doing the most work. That weekend, you walk past a watch counter out of habit. A luxury watch under the glass, catching the light the way that bag did months ago, $11,000. Though the guy tells you the ones actually available today go for closer to 16. You don't buy it. You're not there yet, and you know it without it stinging the way it used to. What's different is you can do the math now without flinching. You know exactly how many Friday transfers that watch represents, how far it is, and how it's not actually that far anymore. The watch stops being a fantasy and becomes a milestone with a price tag, something you're building toward on the same schedule you've kept since that first 50. You walk out without it, and for the first time, that doesn't feel like losing. You think about the phone on the mattress, face down, $208 glowing behind your eyes. That person is still you. You didn't replace them. You just kept showing up for them on the nights you didn't feel like it, until showing up stopped needing a feeling behind it at all. The number was never the point. It moved because you kept doing the boring thing, on the boring schedule, long after it stopped feeling like progress. Somewhere tonight, someone else is face down on a mattress, phone dimmed, doing math they think is only about money. It never was.